we see that what are the scientific methodologies? The step of scientific methodologies, the first one is observation. The second step is hypothesis. Then after the hypothesis, we can do the experiment. Using the experiment observation and results, we can develop a theory, and using that theory, we can predict some data, some informations in future, past, or whatever it is. So, okay, let's say observation. The observation is the first step in scientific method is to take careful observation to collect data. The data may be drawn from a simple observation or they may be obtained from experiments. Second one is the hypothesis. What is hypothesis? From an analysis of this observation and experimental data, a model of nature is hypothesis. I will explain briefly in the next slides. The hypothesis is an assumption that is made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. We should be able to confirm it by testing. Testing of the hypothesis is called the experiment. Okay, I will come to the case study of the examples to understand these observations, hypotheses, and these things. An experiment is a controlled procedure. Actually, experiment we cannot do merely. We have to have a control procedure. For example, the particular temperature, particular volume, or particular atmospheric condition. Likewise, it should be a as a control procedure. It's an experiment. It's a control procedure. An experiment is performed to confirm that the hypothesis is valid. So why we are doing that experiment? Once after the observation, we are developing the hypothesis. Now we are doing an experiment that the hypothesis is valid. The validity of the hypothesis we are making by an experiment. If the results of the experiment don't support the hypothesis, the experimental procedure must be checked. If the procedure is alternate and results still contradict the hypothesis, then the original hypothesis must be modified. The experiment's results are contradict with the hypothesis, then we have to see that original hypothesis had to be modified or to be altered. So accordingly, another experiment, and after modifying that hypothesis, we have to do another experiment is then designed to test the modified hypothesis. Then the next one is theory. If the experimental results confirm the hypothesis become a new theory about some specific aspect of nature. A scientifically accepted general principle based on facts. Last one is the prediction. A careful analysis of the new theory. A prediction about some unknown aspect of nature can be made. Using this theory, we can predict, and also we can determine or we can identify the unknown aspect of nature. Also, we can be made. I would like to give a small experiment to explain these scientific methodologies. The first one is observation. Okay, a gardener notices that plants placed near a window grow taller and greener than those kept in a dark room. This is an observation by the gardener. Okay. How to develop this? Okay. The question is now, does sunlight affect plant growth? So there's a question by the farmer. Okay. Does the sunlight affect plant or growth? Okay. Research and background study. So using the previous research and background study, we know that plants perform photosynthesis using sunlight. Sunlight helps produce food which is essential for growth. Now, how the hypothesis forming? How to form the hypothesis based on for the above observation? If a plant receives more sunlight, then it will grow taller and healthier compared to a plant with less sunlight. This hypothesis we are forming based on the previous research and the background study. Okay. Okay. To validate this hypothesis, now we are doing an experiment. So independent variables are amount of sunlight. That is not dependent. Those are independent variables. Dependent variable is height and the health of the plant. For the experiment, in the experiment, the independent is amount of sunlight. That is independent. But the height and the health of the plant is dependent variable. What is the control variables are same soil, water and temperature for all plants. So it should be a controlled manner. The experiment has to be done in a controlled manner because some soil, if we change the soil, we can say because of this soil, the health and the height of the plant would change. So that's why we have to keep the same pattern or same type of soil. And the water also we cannot change different water also we have to use from a one source of water, from the one source of water. And the temperature also we have to keep in a similar kind of temperature, same temperature or similar temperature of for all plants. So this is the control variables. We had an observation. For that observations, we made some research and background studies. We identified that plants performs photosynthesis using sunlight, and sunlight helps produces food and essential for growth. So based on that, the background studies, we form a hypothesis that if a plant receives more sunlight, then it will grow taller and healthier compared to a plant with the less sunlight. To validate this hypothesis, we are going to do an experiment. In that experiment, we are identifying what are the dependent variables and what are the independent variables and what are the control variables. Okay. Yes. Once it's identified, we put a setup. We place plant A in direct sunlight for 6 hours per day. Okay. Then we place a plant B in a shaded area with 2 hours of sunlight. We place a plant A in a direct sunlight for 6 hours per day. And then we place a plant B in a shaded area with 2 hours of sunlight. We place a plant C in a dark room with no sunlight. There are 3 conditions, but time difference are different. One is direct sunlight 6 hours per day, and the second one is in the shaded area 2 hours of sunlight, and the third one is we are placing in a dark room and no sunlight. And water all plants equally and monitor them for 4 weeks. So here we are changing the independent variable, not the dependent. No, so the dependent variable, we are going to check the dependent variable. Okay, so we are changing the independent variable by a controlled manner, by a controlled experiment. For that, we are using the water all plants equally and monitor them for 4 weeks. After 4 weeks, we are collecting the data collection and analysis. Plant A, 6 hours sunlight, grow 20 centimeter, had a green leaves. Plant B, 2 hours sunlight, grew 12 centimeter, had a lighter leaves. Plant C, no sunlight, grew 5 centimeter, had yellowish leaves and became weak. So the conclusion now, the hypothesis is correct. The hypothesis is correct. Why? Because more sunlight leads better plant growth. Better plant growth. Because in the high sunlight, 6 hours sunlight, it's grow 20 centimeters, and 2 hours sunlight, it's grow 12 centimeters. Okay. Then plant needs sufficient sunlight for photosynthesis. That's why we put some one plant A in the direct sunlight and the plant B in a shaded under shaded area. So also the plants need sufficient sunlight for photosynthesis and overall health. Also, it's correct. So that the basic study, the fourth hypothesis, the sunlight is more leads to better plant growth. The communications and results. The findings can be shared in a research paper, school project, or the scientific journal. Other scientists or students can repeat the experiment to confirm the results, or these experiments can be an extension to the next experiment. The summary of findings of this experiment is now sunlight is crucial for plant growth, and more light is taller, greener plants, no sunlight, weaker and unhealthy plants. If the leaves are greener plants means it's healthy and is grown for the under more sunlight, and no sunlight means the grow also weak and also unhealthy plants. So I think you are very clearly I understood about the principle of scientific methods and how the scientific methods to apply. For an example, observation, how what are the observations? There are we have to form the hypothesis. To validate the hypothesis, we have to identify the independent and dependent variable and the control variables. Using that ideas and the data, we have to do that experiment to validate that hypothesis. If the results are accurate or the matching with the hypothesis, then the hypothesis is the correct one. Next class, we will start the measurements. Measurements done using a correct approach is important in building most theories in physics. As such, we can consider measurements to be the foundation of physics. So first, we study the physics in detail. We have to study about the measurements and units. Okay, good luck. We will meet in the next class.